my name's Kim. I am in a new location and I'm here to talk to you today about the books that I'm planning on reading for our fantasy bingo for the next year. I did a video about this last year where I reacted to the bingo board, and I did do that this year, but it was 2 days before I moved and so the footage was rushed and I was like, you know what, I'll just take my time, I'll move and I'll put together my potential TBR and come back to you with what I want to read. And so that's what I'm going to do today. If you don't know, Fantasy Bingo is a reading challenge that's hosted on the r/fantasy subreddit. It happens every year from April 1st to March 31st. You have to fill the 25 bingo prompts. You can either do it in normal mode, which is just the standard prompt, or you can do it in hard mode, which is just a slight increase of difficulty to the prompt. I never try and do specifically a hard mode card. My only kind of rule for my cards for the past couple of years is that I try to only do authors of colour for my cards. It's a way of just making sure that I continue to read diversely. I do it anyway, but I like having a slot theme to my bingo board, and it feels achievable to have a theme that is authors of colour for 25 prompts. So if I only read 25 books this year, because if there's one thing I'm going to do, it's finish this bingo board, at least I would have read 25 authors of colour. So to get into it, I will start. This is the board for this year. There are some prompts on there which I had to do a bit of digging for, and there are some that I still don't actually have books for, but I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk to you about what the prompts are and then also talk about what book I'm planning to read. I only have one of the books physically at the moment. Some of them I've got as ebooks and some of them I'll be able to get from the library, but I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. So the first square on the board is trans or non-binary protagonist. The prompt is: story features a trans or non-binary protagonist. This protagonist must not be an alien or a robot. Hard mode, set in a pre-modern time period. The book I'm planning to read for this square is by C.L. Polk. It's The Feywild Job. It comes out in June this year. It is a D&D licensed book, and so it specifically follows two X who are forced to team up for an elaborate Feywild heist in a cosy fantasy romance. I've heard quite a bit about C.L. Polk's works before, but I've just never picked up any of their work, and this one I feels like it'll be a good foot in the door for me to see whether I like their work and to see whether I'll pick up anything further. I love D&D, as you can maybe tell if you've been on this channel and you've seen some of the different videos I put out about reading through the D&D classes. I tend not to read fantasy romance, but I will dabble my toes in it, specifically if it tends to be queer fantasy romance and also if it is kind of tangled with other things, so a heist, and also as exes to lovers. I do enjoy exes in fiction, so it seemed like it would be something that I'd be interested in reading. So that's what I'm picking for prompt number 1. Prompt number 2 is judge a book by its title. Read a book based on the title. This can be a title so epic you had to pick it up, or so weird and off-putting you needed to know why it was called this. Hard mode, dive in without reading the blurb or any summaries. For this one, I'm picking Teddy Bears Never Die by Cho Yeon. This is a translated Korean fiction. The tagline is the horror-mance genre mashup you've been waiting for, a new novel where a young girl and a teddy bear team up to enact revenge. This one, the cover is quite eye-catching as well, but then also when you look at the cover with the title, I was like, this is just interesting to me. I did read the blurb a while back when I first added it to my TBR, because I picked this one off my TBR list, but I don't remember what it says. I'm not planning to read it any further until I actually pick up the book, so I feel like I've hit hard mode for that one. Square number 3 is translated. This is a story that's been translated from a language you don't read or speak. Hard mode, first translated into your language within the last 5 years. For this one, I'm planning on picking A Plagued Sea by Kim Bo-young. This one, again, is Korean translated fiction. The tagline for this one is Kim Bo-young unleashes an Lovecraftian nightmare of infection, transformation and abomination, which sounds horrific, to be honest. While waiting for a train to Haewon, an isolated Korean seaside village, bodyguard Moo Young gets a disaster alert on her phone. TVs throughout the station report breaking news of a massive earthquake on the eastern coast. She's looking after a young girl and she boards a train with her because she'd rather face the earthquake than leave the girl in her mother's care. The choice haunts her for the rest of her life. 3 years later, Haewon Village is home to horrors. The earthquake unleashed an ancient plague that transforms its victims into fishy monsters, and the government's lockdown has cut off any hopes for help. And then there's some, I guess kind of spoilers for something that happens, so I won't go into too much further. I really like the look of this one because it reminds me of Bloodborne, and there is a fishing village in Bloodborne. It's obviously Lovecraftian in the sense that it follows the oh my god, I can't remember what the Lovecraft stories, but the Lovecraft story where they're all fish people, you know what I mean. And also reading translated fiction is kind of one of the goals that I always have every year. Last year for the bingo, we got to insert a random square from the past into our current bingo board, and I actually picked the translated square, so it's kind of nice to see it pop up this year. And it's why I just try and sprinkle as many translated books that fit the prompts through the bingo as I can. Next one is small press or self-published. For this one, you have to read a book published by a small press or that's been self-published. Hard mode, the book has under 100 ratings on Goodreads, or it's by an author from a more marginalised group. This one I have put on my bingo for the past 3 years. If you watch my last year's bingo, you will see that this book is in here. It is The Sign of the Dragon by Mary Seeley. This is a poem. It's a 600-page poem, and I have started it about 2 years ago and I've just never picked it back up since. And it follows the fourth born prince who ends up becoming the king, and it essentially is his life story, and it's a big fantasy epic told through poem, and I really do want to read it. I just never actually get around to doing it because I always find something else, and I think I'm a bit anxiety driven about really knuckling down and reading 600 pages worth of poems, because it feels like something that you want to take your time with as opposed to just sitting there and going through it all. Because with the poetry, when I have read it before, you kind of quickly quite move through the different eras in his life. So I am picking that up this time. If I don't pick it up, you have permission to, I don't know, bludgeon me over the head with the 600-page book, I guess. The next square is unusual transportation. This one is kind of fairly self-explanatory. Story includes a surprising method of moving from place to place. By unusual, we mean it's out of the ordinary in real life and uncommon to the book's broader genre. It can include a highly unique take on a genre staple, or could be something completely original for a mode of transport. Hard mode, the transportation is not combustion or steam powered. For this one, I'm going off of recommendations on Reddit, and so I'm planning on picking The Siege of Burning Grass by Premi Mohammed. This one has some animal-based transportation, I believe, and so I won't really know much more until I get into the book, but essentially it is a fantastical story following revolutionaries and colonialism and nationalism. I've read from Premi Mohammed before and I want to pick up more of her works. I just haven't really gotten around to it. She is releasing a book this year that is linked to the Magnus Archives, which I really do want to pick up, so I think it's probably worth me picking this one up as well. Onto the second row. The square is the afterlife. The story deals with the realm of the dead. It could be communicating with the dead, spirits who are transferring over, or being set in the afterlife itself. Hard mode, the afterlife does not depict a good place versus bad place. For this one, I want to read Where the Dead Brides Gather by Nuzu Ono. I've had this for about, well, I want to say probably 2 years now, and I haven't got around to picking it up. And I do try and look to my actual shelves first before looking at, you know, my ebooks or buying books for bingo. But obviously, because the prompts are so specific, they don't always fit. So I really want to at least read this one. The blurb of this one says, Barta, a young girl tormented by nightmares, wakes one night to find herself standing sentinel before her cousin's door. Her cousin is to get married the next morning, but only if she can escape the murderous attack of a ghost bride who used to be engaged to her groom. A supernatural possession helps battle and vanquish the vengeful ghost bride, and following a botched exorcism, she's transported to Ibaja La, the realm of the dead brides. There she receives secret powers to fight malevolent ghost brides before being sent back to the human realm, where she must learn to harness her new abilities as she strives to protect those whom she loves. So it's not super long. I've had it, as I said, for a couple of years. I would like to read it, and so this is my goal, to get through for that prompt. The next one is Game Changer, a story that features a game or a competition. Hard mode, the protagonist bends or breaks the rules in some way. For this one, I'm planning on reading Runtime by S.B. Divya. This one is a sci-fi novella, and it takes place in a cyborg Tour de France. There is a character named Marmeg who doesn't have funding and doesn't have support. She cobbled her gear together from the parts she found in rich people's garbage, and ends up entering the challenge in order to get a better life for herself and her younger brothers. So it sounds like it'll be quite fast-paced and interesting. I'd never heard of it until I was looking through potential books to read, because it was quite hard to find a book for this one that I was really interested in, so that's my potential for that square. One of the squares I don't have anything for yet is Vacation Spot. For this one, the prompt is that you pick something that you would like to visit, and it could be fictional or it could be non-fictional. It's obviously subjective because everywhere has different places they want to visit, There's no hard mode for this one, and I think that's why I've kind of struggled, because a lot of the time a lot of the books I read are so fantastical and they tend to be not great places. So I'm kind of holding off on this one in the hopes that something throughout the year will crop up and I'll be able to see something that I really like the look of and that I would love to be in, and then I can insert something for this square. The next square is 5 short stories. For this one I'm planning on reading River of Bones and Other Stories by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a short story collection that she's put together with all of her short stories from across her career, as well as a finishing kind of short story to a series that she released, which is the Trail of Lightning series. I read that book series I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and I really quite liked it. I first came into contact with Rebecca Roanhorse through the Jordan Peele short story collection, and her story from that book is also in this collection. That was one of my favourite stories from that collection. I really just liked the kind of way that it was written, and I still remember it quite vividly to this day. I'd like to read a bit more of Rebecca Roanhorse's work, and also it'd be nice to kind of wrap up that series because it doesn't look like the Trail of Lightning series is going to get any other published finish to the series, and so I would like to finish it. The 10th prompt is Older Protagonist. This is a story that features a main character who is at least 50 years old. Hard mode, the protagonist does not have exceptional longevity or immortality. For this one, I'm planning on reading The Art of Destiny by Wesley Chu. So this is the second book in the War Art series. There is a character within this who is really old. Her name's Taiji. She, in the first book, is kind of like the mentor to one of the characters in the book. She was a really fun character. She was really skilled in her field and people always underestimated her because she was so old. I feel like she was in her 70s or her 80s, and so this book felt like the perfect one to read for the square, and also means it holds me accountable and means I finish another book in the series. Then we have a two-parter, so squares 11 and squares 15 are duology part 1 and part 2. So number 11 is read the first book in a duology, and part 2, number 15, is read the second book in a duology. It does say that you are really allowed to read the same author for both squares, which is an exception because normally you have to read a different author for every single square. And the hard mode for part 1 is to read something by an author you haven't read before, and for part 2 is to finish a different duology to the one you started for duology part 1. That was a big mouthful. Either way, the book that I'm planning on reading for this square is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I have this one downloaded on my Kindle. I have tentatively started it because I was thinking about reading it for last bingo, so I'm glad I didn't in the end. This one is a kind of superhero based story set in New York where the city is kind of alive, and so it really reminds me of the D20 series that they did where the city was alive there as well, and so I would like to read it. I think for the second prompt for number 15 I will finish out the duology, because realistically, am I going to start another duology? Probably not. And so it would be nice to finish something out. I have read from N.K. Jemisin before, so it won't fit hard mode for the first square. Then we have published in 2026. This is one of the staple squares that they have every year. They just change it to obviously whatever the next year is. This is read a book published for the first time in 2026. Hard mode is that it's the author's first published novel. The book that I want to read is The Republic of Memory by Mahmoud El Said. This is a sci-fi book. The Safina is a city ship 200 years into its voyage from the ruins of Earth to a new habitable world. Its crew maintain the ship generation after generation while protecting their ancestors, the final remnants of Earth's doomed network empire, by keeping them alive in cryostasis. And it's one of those science fiction stories where the crew is starting to think about why they are doing this and what the purpose is. I really like the look of the cover. I think it looks really interesting. I don't read too many sci-fi books really. If you look at my shelves, the majority of what I read is fantasy, and so I kind of dip in and out of sci-fi, but this one is one that looked quite interesting to me. Then we have another one that I haven't actually got a book for, which is Explorers and Rangers. So this is a story that features an explorer, a character who likes to travel and investigates unfamiliar region, or a ranger, a wilderness or forest oriented warrior who specialises in things like stealth, bows, tracking. Hard mode, the explorer or ranger has an animal companion. It's ironic that this one is hard for me because the series that I've done on this channel is reading like the D&D classes, and I haven't got that many for Ranger. There are some, but they're not by authors of colour, and so I'm still looking to see what I want to pick for that square. I'm hoping that when I do a bit more research into the books that I might read for that potential video, I'll figure it out, but I'll come back to that one. So if you've got any recommendations, do let me know. Moving on to the next row, we have one word title. The story has a one-word title, self-explanatory. Hard mode, the title is not a proper noun, so no name of people or places. For this one, I want to read Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi. This one is science fiction set in 2050s Earth. It weaves together a whole bunch of different narratives from people who are space dwellers, for people who are trying to renew a crumbling city on Earth, journalists, marshals, and it looks at race and class and gentrification in the space race essentially. For number 17, non-human protagonist, this one is a story that features a main character who's not human, hard mode. There are no human points of view in the story. For this one, I'm planning on reading The Djinn Bot of Shantipur by Samit Basu. This one I've seen for a couple of years floating about, and I thought it'd be quite interesting to read because one of the main characters is a girl named Lena. She's the daughter of failed revolutionaries, and her brother is Bador, a small monkey bot with an big attitude and bigger ambitions. And I just thought it was really interesting. And also it's in the title kind of that there's the Djinn Bot of Shantipur, that there is some sort of non-humanness within that. This story seems to focus a lot on kind of like cyborgs and the kind of tech in that sense, so I felt like it would be a good pick for this square. Next is middle grade. So obviously I need to read a middle grade book. Hard mode, the author is entirely new to me. So this was one that I struggled a little bit with, but eventually I came to the idea that I will read Kiki's Delivery Service by Aiko Kadono for this square. I read Howl's Moving Castle with my friends for a little book club at the beginning of the year, and I really liked it, and I thought actually it'd be really cool to read this book as well, because me and my sister are hopefully going to Japan next year, and we obviously want to see loads of different Ghibli things while we're there, and also try and watch quite a few of the films over the next year before we go, some of which we've seen before. Like I have seen Kiki's Delivery Service before, but it was a good, God, I don't even know how many years ago, probably when I was like 18 or something like that, so a decade ago. So it'd be really nice to read a book and then go off to watch the film afterwards, especially because I think this book will be quite easy to read, it'll be quite light-hearted, and it's really nice as well to just be able to read books that then went on to go and be Ghibli films. For number 19, First Contact, you need to read a story that prominently features interspecies or interracial meetings for the first time, hard mode, non-violent first contact. For this one, I'm planning on reading The Lesson by Cadwell Turner. This one is essentially set just after the first contact, but the first contact is, and the impacts of it are what follow throughout the story. Looks at things like colonialism and conflict between the human race and this alien colony essentially that is looming over them. Next is murder mystery. So a main plot that focuses on solving a murder. Hard mode, the main character is not a detective or private investigator. For this one, I want to read House of Margins by Tolotolo Samase. Apologies for pronunciation. This is a new release that comes out this year. It follows a girl whose sister goes missing and who was meant to do a writing residency, and things went awry essentially. And so her sister Renewa ends up going and trying to figure out what happened to her sister after this Tree and Crime podcast picks up the story, and she is going to find out what happens in this strange house, and there is ghostly things happening as well. Onto the final line, we have number 21, which is Cat Squatter, a book that is over 500 pages. The hard mode for this one is over 900 pages. I am planning on sticking for just over 500 pages because I haven't read a book for the past month, to be honest. So reading a book over 900 pages feels unrealistic. But I want to read Fonda Lee's The Last Contract of Asako. I read the Greenbone Saga a couple of years ago. I really liked it. I really like the sort of stories that Fonda Lee puts together. This one follows a legendary swordswoman. Her legend is kind of coming to an end and she's set to go on one final mission. This one feels like John Wick for me, and I am a John Wick lover, and so I felt like this would be a fun one to read. For 22, we have Feast Your Eyes on this, which is a food or meal is significant to the story's plot. Hard mode is to attempt to make a dish from the series. I feel like I'm not going to do that because the series I want to read for this is the Dungeon Meshi series. I started to watch the anime of this, but I didn't get super far in, and I feel like this will be really easy to pick up, so I can probably get through quite a few volumes. I believe when you want to read a manga for something, they recommend you read at least 5 volumes, and it should be fairly easy to get through those. I don't envision that I'll be cooking anything from the series, although I do think there is like some kind of cookbook or something like that, which might be fun. But I don't know, there are lots of monster different parts in there, so we'll see. Then we have published in the 70s, so obviously to read a book that was first published in the 70s, hard mode is that it was written by a woman. The obvious kind of choice for me in this is to read Kindred by Octavia Butler. This one is kind of scary for me, not in the sense that it's really intensely focused on slavery, but in the sense that it focuses on time travel, and I am a time travel anti. I don't like reading about time travel in books, and so whether I actually get to this one or not, I'm kind of unsure about. I have read Octavia Butler a couple of times for bingo. I read her last year, I read Dawn, and the year before I read Parable of the Sower, and so it would be great to read a little bit more Octavia Butler, and especially because there are not that many people who have written in this time period who are women of colour that are kind of like supremely popular. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely stuff out there. Toni Morrison is the obvious example, but obviously Octavia Butler is the big SFF author who was writing in that period, and so it kind of feels right to pick something from her. If I manage to find something else, then I might pick that up, but at this point it is Kindred, so I'll have to go with my time travel fear. We have politics and court intrigue. So to read a book where politics are central to the plot, this covers things like royalty, elections and wars, and well as local smaller politics. Hard mode, there's a prominent focus on politics at a sea level or lower. For this one, I want to read The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This one I have on my Kindle. I have been eyeing it up for a while and I really need to get around to reading it. It's a really chunky book that focuses on these two characters who become allies during this uprising against an emperor. I read the first chapter, I think probably last year or the year before, and I remember that there was quite a dramatic event that happened, and so it would be really nice to actually make a dent in this one, considering this is a really big series and it's also a really popular series, and so I'd really like to start it at least. Finally, we have the Author of Colour Square. This one is obviously pretty interchangeable. You could read anything for this square, but the hard mode is that the character does not live in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia or New Zealand. For this one, I'm planning on reading Shubaik Lubaik by Dina Mohammed. I believe that's how you pronounce it, but I could be wrong. This one fits hard mode because the author is from Egypt. It is a graphic novel, but it's an over 500 page graphic novel, so I feel like it fits perfectly for this square in terms of it being pretty chunky, from an author that lives outside of all of those countries mentioned, and also one that's just I've been eyeing up for a while now. I believe it was Jamila who posted about it, and it sounded really interesting when she was speaking about it, and so I really wanted to get around to reading it at some point, and so bingo is obviously the perfect time. It is set in a fantastical Cairo where wishes are real, and the title Shubaik Lubaik is a fairy tale rhyme which means your wish is my command. And with that, it brings me to the end of what I'm planning to read for this year's bingo. Will I manage to get to all the books on here, particularly books like The Sign of the Dragon, which I've been saying I'm going to read for 3 years? Realistically, probably not. But the only way you'll find out is if you stay tuned and inevitably see my video in 10 months time where I'm talking about how I've got to read 10 books left for bingo and none of them are the books I originally set out to pick, because that's what always happens, but that is also the fun of bingo. If you're participating in bingo, let me know any books that you're planning on reading, or if you have any recommendations for me, and I will see you in my next video.